Hey there guys, and welcome back. Here we are, Project Update stream. Obviously nothing happened yesterday. I will tell you the story about that one afterwards when we're done here. But starting off, I do have the camera at the top because sanding jig is pretty big. So how has this guy turned out? Had a couple of things I needed to change, but otherwise at the moment it is feeling pretty good. I am pretty happy with it. The only additional change I might make is I might make these hinges a little bit smaller just so that this plate gets closer to the sanding plate. Otherwise, let's talk about it. Overall, works as expected. These bearings I knew were going to be pretty cheap. I ended up buying the cheap ones. They feel a little chunky, but honestly, it's really not that bad. You can probably hear the grinding a little bit in them. I did pack them with lithium grease, so it's not that. They are greased up. Otherwise, things I had to change. First thing was on the back side here. You'll notice that we have the long bars, going across instead of these little guys that I had originally. Now, these little guys, I put them in there, and I realized that I only had the one point of contact, just the one screw hole, to keep this lined up with the extrusion. I could have changed this to be like the corner brackets. And again, one of those things, corner brackets are black, so it's going to be hard to see, but you can probably make out that they have these little, if I can get a better angle, there we go. So do you see on the corner here how it has little centering pins on it? So one of those things, I could have put centering pins on these guys on the backhand side so that they fit into the extrusion, and that would have fixed it. But I figured the simpler and more precise way to do it is just to extend the rod holders all the way across. That also gives me the exact spacing between where the linear bearings are going to be interfacing with the plate. So it's one of those things. It was just plain better. It just had many benefits. So that's what we went with. No big deal. That was an easy change. Otherwise, with these holes, so one of the things we had talked about this, I did through bolt this, threaded this extrusion, the top extrusion, and then through bolted it. To do that, I made up these little jigs right here. Again, black because nobody's going to see them, but they basically just have holes in the side of them. I did 3, 5, or I think actually, what were my sizes? It was, oh, that's right. That's what the third one is. Okay, so it was 3, 6, because 6 millimeters is what gets threaded into this. So 3 and 6 to drill the initial holes, and then I need to countersink the head right. You see how the head of the bolt is countersunk? So then I had this 10 millimeter hole right here. Technically speaking, it needed to be a little bit larger than 10 millimeters for the bolt head to get through. Unfortunately, 10 millimeters is the largest drill bit that I have, and I don't have an actual countersinking, bit. So I'm just using a regular drill bit to do that. It's one of those things that probably doesn't show up terribly well on the camera, maybe a little bit. But I was a little bit messy, and actually you might be able to see a little bit of it below the corner bracket right here, where I skipped off a little bit trying to open that up to get it, to ream it out to get it big enough for the bolt head. Otherwise, that was pretty good. The next thing to talk about, I guess, well, all right, while we're on the topic of these brackets, I am keeping these brackets around because through bolting extrusions is something that happens relatively often, so I'm not going to just toss these in my trash bag. I'm going to keep these around for future use. However, these guys right here are the ones that I used for the holes at the end of the extrusions on the hinge. So those had to be, or needed to be, in equal distance on both sides. Both hinges wanted to be square, right? So same exact idea. Had a 1 and a 5 because I used 5 millimeter bolts on these guys. I mean, not a 1 and a 5, a 3 and a 5, 3 millimeter and 5 millimeter holes to drill the through holes, and it came out just fine for the brackets. Onto the kickstand on the side. Now, I am finding it's one of those things. I have so many parts of articulation between this point right here, this point right here, and the bottom point. Those all pivot. Now this is rigid right now. it's actually, you know, I'm not going to be putting much weight on it to begin with because we're sanding small parts. But even if I do, even right now, this is not slipping, so I'm extremely happy with how this is turning out. The fact of the matter is that this bottom one probably doesn't even need to be here, you know, it probably doesn't even need to be movable. I could probably make that a fixed joint down the bottom, and we'd be just fine between these 2 points of articulation right here on the L bracket. Alternatively, I could make one of these two fixed and have, you know, I might even, fact of the matter is that I might even be able to, the more I was playing with it, just get away with having both the bottom and here, bottom, there you go. One of those things, you're on the opposite side of the camera from me. So I could probably get away with having both this fixed and just move this perfectly across up and then the bracket itself up and down. The reason I have the L bracket, just to remind us, is so that I can get to the bolt holes, because the bolt holes are jammed between these two guys, so I don't have a really good method to get to it to tighten and fix these two together. That's why we have an L bracket. But just ideas I'm throwing out there. Again, they're not actually necessary because we're plenty rigid as is, and I'm not putting that much weight down on it. One of these things, if I turn this to the back here, you'll see how close this gets to the extrusion here. The extrusion is not actually stopping it. Okay, this is stopping on linear bearings before it gets to the extrusion, so it doesn't matter that it's overlapping. I believe we did take that into account on stream. The other thing to notice, now that you're seeing the back of it, is you can see I have these set up two different ways. The L bracket is facing two different ways. That is just a point that this can really be set up in so many different configurations because of all the points of articulation that it doesn't necessarily matter. So even though these are opposite, they're both supporting it, you know, equally sturdily. There's not one side that is supporting it worse than the other based on the geometry that I have the bracket set up in. So just wanted to point that out. Last thing to point out is these corner brackets on the inside here for the sanding plate. This is where the sandpaper goes, and then these holes are to mount it down. These guys, I realized this is the closest the sanding plate can go, so I really need to move these guys to the outside. That's a very minor change, moving these corner brackets to the outside so that this plate can go in further. The reason I put them on the inside is because of these holes on the outside corners. I didn't want to interfere with them, but I believe even if I move them to the outside, I probably can still get to those holes to clamp down the sandpaper, so it's probably not that big of a deal. And actually, I think I said this at the very beginning, but possibly shrinking these hinges down to bring this plate down a bit further. Technically speaking, I have a little bit of room down here where I could actually loosen the cross beams up. I could loosen, let me just put it down like this. So you can see how I have, actually this side you see better, I have about a finger's width between the hinge and the crossbeam right here, the rod holder. So I could move this a finger's width down. It's technically less than an inch, it's maybe half an inch. So this can move down further, and the other alternative, like I said, is just shrinking up these brackets so that the whole entire top frame is closer to the sanding frame. And that is all of that. Now, one thing you will notice is that this is right now a little bit, actually there's two things. This reminds me, I did not tighten this down all the way because again I realized that these corner brackets have to move. That's one. The other thing to note is that these are only really pivoting up and down, they're not pivoting left and right, which does not matter because we're flat against the ground is not going anywhere, and there's no forces lifting this up. So it's just something I'm going to mention, is that even though I don't have this tightened, it doesn't necessarily matter because it's only pivoting right now. The other thing, however, is I ran out of, because I'm using more 4mm bolts, I ran out of 4mm bolts to get the hinges down. The hinges are annoying. You do have to mount the hinges in place first, which means that you got to line them up correctly, and then mount the top frame onto it after they're already bolted down. These hinges are not, the bolts that I have on the hinges are not sized correctly. I did not countersink these bolts. I left this with the full 6mm on the hinge. I'm trying to get the correct angle for you to see this. So you can see how thick this is at the bottom here, and I didn't countersink it. So the closest I had was an M4 by 12, and I really needed more like an M4 by 10. This bolt is bottoming out right now, plus these are my last two M4 by 12s that I have. I've been thinking about, because I've been using more M4s, just getting a variety pack. Because it's such a pain in the butt, it wouldn't necessarily matter whether or not I got the cap heads or the button heads. However, in theory, the button heads would be better, but I do like cap heads better because they give you the larger hex head driver to use. So I probably will be getting a multi-pack of M4 hex knob heads, rather, socket heads, that's what I mean. Thumb screw type, whatever you want to call them. So that's the only real change that's going to happen. However, because everything else is so rigid on the top frame, because of the kickstand locks the top frame in so tightly, it doesn't necessarily matter that these hinges at the bottom are not tightened down all the way. It's not going anywhere. So that is all that. Before we switch over to Fusion to talk about the other stuff, we'll move on to the slider, Type 3 slider. This is the first one I printed. Technically, I printed 2 of these frames. However, one of those things, this was going to be a combination of Type 1 and Type 2, the things I liked best from both of them. First one being the spring on Type 2, second one being the mounting position on Type 1. So I did that, I put this all together, and again, I printed out 2 of these frames, unfortunately, because I didn't think there was going to be a problem. However, as it turns out, I forgot, or I didn't think of, because it wasn't really an issue on Type 1, because it wasn't an issue on Type 1 because of how Type 1 ran the rubber band around here, I forgot to put the positioning tab in the center of the retainer to keep it in place. And that means that this, as I slide it up, you see how it gets stuck, and it's going to be hard to see on the camera probably, especially at this distance. Here, we'll get it as close as possible, but I'm trying to get a good angle. Okay, you might be able to see that it's starting to cant, and it's one of those things, the spring is pushing down on this side, which cants this whole entire back piece, the back piece of the retainer. Well, actually, this is the retainer. I call this the slide in front. So the retainer itself is canting around this bolt and therefore jamming up on the slide opening. So that, unfortunately, is something that needed to be fixed, and I have not had the time to print out the next version. I do have it designed, it just needs to be printed out. It's one of those things, it's going to be another, I think, 3 hours for both the frames, and an hour and a half for new flags and retainers, because I can't use the old flags because they're a different shape base. So one of those things, I'm looking at something like 6-7 hours to finish printing out new versions of these. So unfortunately, I don't have those available. We'll go ahead and hop into the CAD now. Fusione. So here we go. Here's Type 3. And in case you were not familiar with what I was talking about, this little feature right here, which I had on Type 2, is what I forgot to add in. So you can see how the retainer goes straight through and locks in so that it cannot spin because of the force on this tab right here. The other thing, since I needed to reprint this part, I had not dragged the spring far enough away from the wall, which is why I have to reprint the frame as well. Otherwise, I'm going to have a problem with it scraping the wall like I've been complaining about on Type 2. So you can see this has a good healthy gap between the spring and the wall right here, which is why I need, again, to reprint the frame as well. Otherwise, that should be the final modification that has to happen, and then we will be back in business for Tooth and Tail. So that's everything with that. Now, the real quick project that we threw together last minute on Friday night is the paper towel holder. Now, and I knew I was going to forget to do this, so while I'm talking, pretend like I'm not doing things in the background. The paper towel holder, had a couple things that need to be changed. One, you may notice that this is a bit longer. This is a bit longer because you may notice this is a different shape. The wall bracket is a different shape. Slightly different shape. You actually may not notice as much. But basically, the paper towels were right up. Well, it's one of those things. It's the paper towel roll is not an exact cylinder, and I was modeling off of an exact cylinder, and therefore, because it was oblong from being a little smushed, you know, it was scraping against the wall. So I brought this whole entire thing out half an inch rather, which involved, you know, obviously changing this bracket, you know, changing how this bracket curved to make it look slightly better. It doesn't look that bad in CAD. I don't particularly like, you see this little hump right here. Printed out, I don't particularly like that, so I might come back and smooth that out a little bit more so that the print doesn't, it's not as pronounced on the print. Otherwise, in order to accommodate the fact that we brought this out a little bit, I also extended this arm. The next thing that I did off stream, is I realized a couple things basically. So this rod originally was attached to this bracket, and then halfway through the stream we're booking through it and I detached this rod from this bracket, and I realized that that means that now this tensioning wheel now spins freely on the rod. It causes the rod to spin, which means that there is no tension actually on the lever arm. So that was a problem. So I put a through bolt through there and countersunk a nut in there. So, and then also opened up the arm so that the arm is on this shaft. So now the shaft is bolted, and actually let me do these so you can see how there's a countersink on this side too. So the shaft has its own hex, keeping it locked to the to the bracket, and then on top of that it has a bolt going through, keeping it snug up in that hex. So that's the change I had to make in order to fix these two in place so that this did not spin, so the whole entire shaft did not spin. That was an oversight on my part, unfortunately. The next thing that I had to do, I chose to move it off of this tube right here to begin with. So I moved it off, and then after I got version 1 mounted, I realized that my idea of just taking this side out and putting the paper towel tube in does not actually work that terribly well. It's really difficult to do. At which point I need to make this removable, which means that this also needed to have a lip on the backhand side to keep it from sliding out. My original design was, you'll recall, this end was a square, and this square, basically I was just going to glue it into the bracket was all I was going to do, so that it was permanently fixed in there. That obviously is not happening at this point. So because both these sides needed to be removed, I need to put a lip in here so that this does not fall through into the paper towel roll, and furthermore I needed it sunken into the bracket in order for this lever arm to swing past it. Otherwise this lever arm would need to be extended out much further from this wall in order to go past this lip, which I wanted to avoid. I wanted to keep this as tight to the wall as possible. Now, the very interesting thing, these holes on the inside. So this is not the exact, and let me switch over to gallery mode so that we don't have any annoying things on the screen. You just got the pictures. I have always said that because 3D prints are like 85 to 90% hollow, well, it's more like 80 to 90% hollow, you don't really gain anything from hollowing them out. In this instance, as it turns out, I did the I did the math, and this is an earlier version. This isn't exactly the numbers that you'll see printing it yourself, but as you can see here, the hollow sides, if I put a hole all the way through, this does end up at $1.81, and the other one ends up at $2.01. So that's 20 cents difference, and it's one of those things. The print time is longer for the Hollow 2s because, again, as I said, it normally doesn't make that much of a difference because you're adding extra walls by putting holes in it. That's where, this gets you. So it's an extra 20 minutes for 20 cents because you got to print extra walls. So that's the trade-off you're getting, but I decided because it's a 20 cents, 20 cents you might consider worth it. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's 20 cents on $2, which is, all 10%. So it's not all that much. Not that one. Ooh, that was bad. So it was, I should probably fix that. So anyway, my point being is that I decided it's enough to at least give the option. So I left the option in here. Let me see if I can just swap this out really quick. There we go. I want to make sure that if that ever happens again, because that's my edge window, and because I closed Scroll, Dungeon Scroll, which we were working on the other day. Yes, apply changes. Because I closed that window, it just went to the next active window, which happens to be my streaming. So that was not great. Let's see. Anyway, so I left this as an option, and the fact of the matter is that you have both, right? So I left this solid version. Again, you can save yourself 20 minutes and cost yourself 20 extra cents. Otherwise, you can print the Hollow version. So that is all. Oh, that's not all the stuff for that. So let me hop back to camera really quick and grab this off the wall. So here's this in real life. This is the lever arm. You'll notice that my rod is sticking way out. The backhand side is not even. This is cut at the length that the CAD called for, which was just an arbitrary length to begin with. What I have found, and the reason it's sticking out this far, is that this is not rigid enough in between the small connecting rod in the middle here and this rod, the actual lever rod on the top side. That's not rigid enough, and therefore as this spins, as the torsion tries to spin it in, it actually twists. So I probably am going to print one more version replacing the center rod right here and this one with thicker versions. This one I may not thicken up this whole entire length. That may not be necessary. I may just throw a shoulder on here, an inch long shoulder, let's say, to try to keep this from twisting. Because since it twists, it doesn't apply enough pressure. I tried to keep it from twisting with my hand, and it seemed like it does provide enough pressure so long as the whole entire mechanism does not cant. One of those things, my hand, however, may also be applying pressure downwards, in which case if I thicken this all up and it still is not holding the paper towel roll hard enough so that you can tear a sheet off, that's the entire point of this mechanism, then I will replace this spring. This is my smaller spring with a larger spring, which will give me significantly more torque. That's the only other change that may happen with this guy. Well, this part right here is almost definitely going to change. Again, this rod will have to get a little bit longer to accommodate the extra thickness, but point being, that is where we're at with that. And that is all the project updates that I have. So, yeah, okay. Yesterday, no streaming yesterday because I was printing all these parts out. Easy enough. I didn't print most of the parts out on... Well, I didn't. I spent, let's see, I lost about 4 hours because I thought we were going to play D&D on Friday night. And as it turns out, we did not play D&D on Friday night. Basically, one of our players couldn't show up, and we were thinking about playing without him, but then another player who I thought had been playing, and I talked about this on stream, I thought one of my other players would be playing with us, but he had been AFK, had not been responding. Well, he finally responded and said he wanted to play but couldn't play Friday night. So since we had one player that couldn't play and another player who wanted to play but couldn't make it Friday night, we just moved it to Saturday. Saturday, I told you that Saturday afternoon would be a bust. I wouldn't be able to do it Saturday afternoon, anything Saturday afternoon. So that killed Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. Saturday morning, I was again, continuing with all this printing. So I wasn't able to get this printing done Friday night, unfortunately, because of all the mix-up, and that was all last minute, I should mention. So that was all last minute, so I only got just so much printing done because I wasn't going to print while I was streaming, obviously. And yeah, so that's what happened with that. Otherwise, D&D, we did not actually get to the encounters that I did on stream on Wednesday, Thursday. Those encounters that I designed on stream Wednesday, Thursday are still in the bucket because the party decided to, with the new character, because we had the new character introduced, the new character insisted on searching through everything. And, well, that session unfortunately ended with one of the characters dead, ? And I say question mark because a couple of the players had to leave as we were wrapping up. It's one of those deals where the characters were, well, it's one of those things. You guys are familiar with the second dungeon that I did, the first one that I did on stream. That one I had the Aboleth in the bottom left-hand corner of the of the caves underneath the Keep Vallis, or Fort Vallis rather, underneath Fort Vallis. We had a dungeon system, a cavern system, and an Aboleth was part of the bottom left-hand side. The characters were slightly underleveled for the Aboleth, however, because I had 2 more characters than I was anticipating for the fight to begin with, I decided to go ahead and at least put it out there. Now, most of the characters were injured. However, I figured, okay, whatever. It's going to be an encounter where the characters run away, and they definitely did. All the characters did run away. However, Aboleth has a mind control ability, and he mind controlled the one character that stayed at the rear in order to watch everybody else escape. And that character ended up getting knocked unconscious by one of the other characters who came back to drag him away from the Aboleth to save his life. And unfortunately, he ended up bleeding out, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote, and I'm saying in theory this character is dead because and this was all a tangent right now, so I will remind you that I said I was writing up some of the characters had to leave, and therefore I was writing up a summary of what happened after the characters left, which was during the runaway segment from the Aboleth. So I explained to them that they ran away, the character got knocked out, and unfortunately passed out. As I was writing that to the group in the group chat, I realized that the characters who completely ran away, they had gotten back. They had come back for the 2 remaining characters, the one that was dragging the unconscious character. They came back to him, and they were literally 1 round away from being there to save the dying character. However, I had skipped over them at least 2 turns because one of those things, just heat of the combat, cinematic, etc. Just, they were out of the picture. They had left and completely left the map to begin with. So they were out of sight, out of mind, and I had skipped over them. However, they would have turned around a good 1 to 2 turns earlier, which, again, they were only 1 turn late to begin with, getting back to the dying character. So it's one of these things where it probably should be retconned that they got there just in time to save the dying character. The dying character rolled a pass and then a critical fail, and then a second pass, which put him at 2 and 2 on death saving throws, and unfortunately failed his 3rd one. Or his 4th one, rather. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so his 4th one. So he failed his 4th one. But again, that should have happened after the characters had already gotten there. So, one of those things. It may be retconned. Otherwise, 2 of the characters are currently suffering from the curse of the Aboleth, which means that they cannot leave Wooder. They need to stay in contact with Wooder. Otherwise, they will basically... I forget how it words it in the monster manual, but I'm basically saying that they suffocate death, basically. So, yeah, that's where that campaign went. And after we resolve all these issues with A, them being cursed, and B, the whether or not this last character is actually dead, the next thing we need to do is resolve the fact that they left... Well... the new character actually took some of the super soldier blood back with them, so that's good. They can at least have that to investigate for the organization that they're working for. However, they did not discover any of the hidden potions that were in there, which would have been a major find. And they did not bring the book back with them. They had found a book with coded language. None of the characters could figure out what was going on with the book. They just thought it was a little bit weird, but didn't really, pay much mind to it. So unfortunately, they didn't bring that back either. So I may have to, before the guild adventure that we did on stream, I may have to actually insert another encounter in order to tie into this whole entire process of tracking down the big bad guy, because they did not acquire enough information to actually get them to that point. So we may be doing another design stream in order to create another encounter that I wasn't anticipating, in order to give them another opportunity to find information on the big bad. So that is the project update for the D&D stream. One of those things, not a project update in this sense, but D&D stream is something that does happen on this. The prep work at least happens on this channel. And for the record, while this is a pickup offbeat campaign that we have not been recording, we do have the Pathos podcast at pathospodcast.com if you want to listen to our other adventures. I do not DM any of the other adventures. I did do for a while a segment, was it Design Corner? Something like that. It was a corner segment, where I talked about monster design and whatnot. So that is still up there on the podcast as well, in case you want to try to dig it up. Otherwise, Pumpkin Spice and Lightlessness are our two main campaigns, and we also ran through the Lost Mines of Phandelver. That campaign is completed. We're done through that one. Otherwise, Pumpkin Spice and Lightlessness are currently on hiatus. I don't know what's going on with them. So that is the full wrap-up on Pathos Podcast. 4 projects in terms of projects. I'm not going to do another update stream on any of these guys. I do need to find time to properly update all my YouTube streams for the last month, because it's one of those things. I've been a bit lax on putting end cards in and adding any extra links that I need to the live streams. So that is something I need to find time to do. I also wanted to, because I haven't been doing this ever since the printables contest. We decided to stop doing printables contests. Ever since that point, I haven't been uploading stuff to printables or Thingiverse. I should probably do that. I should probably get back to uploading that stuff. So I need to find time to do that. Otherwise, I want to, one of those things, obviously, this stuff is all easy. This stuff will get done in no time. The stream deck, we have to come back redesigned. The stream animation program, we need to refactor. But in the meantime, to keep the new content coming, not just the content that we've been working on for forever, I like keeping new stuff in the mix, and we just finished off, or are in the process of finishing off a bunch of stuff right now, so I need new content coming in. Next project I want to do probably after lunch, because again, we won't be able to do Tooth and Nail after lunch, because this stuff is not printed out. But after lunch, whenever some of this gets done printing, because I want to get some of it printed at any rate, keep progress on that. I want to do a winder/dewinder. It's a project that I've had sitting in the back of my brain for a while now, and one of those things, I mentioned this on stream multiple times, but this guy, unfortunately, this is my heavy wire for springs. This guy got tangled up at the end, got lost inside the box. I had to pull it outside of the box. This needs to be rewound. So one of those things, I have an excuse to do it. The other major project that I'm thinking about doing is one of those things. One of my biggest problems is print time right now. So I'm thinking about going back, and I've shown you the previous design for my Ender 3 electronics case. I'm thinking about going back and doing a new design on that one, because that one had some issues, which is why it is not done right now. So maybe do that one next after the winder dewinder. And that is everything from me. So yep, typical 20-minute outro. As always, guys, thank you for watching if you have been, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world. And I will catch you next time.